Here's a question before we start. Would you send your child to war? Not as a soldier, as a miracle worker. Because a charismatic preacher promised that God would part the sea for them. That children, pure and innocent, could do what armies couldn't. Conquer Jerusalem, reclaim the Holy Land, through faith alone. Would you let your child go? In 1212, thousands of parents said yes, and sent their children on a march that would end in death, slavery, and heartbreak. This is the Children's Crusade, one of the darkest chapters in medieval history, and one of the most misunderstood. So get comfortable. Maybe hold someone you love a little closer, and let me tell you about the summer when Europe's children disappeared. Let's start with what you think you know, the Children's Crusade. You've probably heard of it. A bunch of kids, inspired by faith, marched to Jerusalem to reclaim the Holy Land from Muslims, with innocence and prayer instead of swords. It sounds almost noble. Tragic, but noble. Except that's not what happened. Not even close. The real story is darker, more complicated, more human, and way more heartbreaking. So let's talk about what actually happened in 1212. First, the context. The Crusades had been going on for over a century. Christians trying to take Jerusalem from Muslim control. Wave after wave of armies, thousands dead, fortunes spent, and by 1212, they were losing. The Fourth Crusade, 1202 to 1204, had been a disaster. Instead of fighting Muslims, Crusaders sacked Constantinople, a Christian city. They looted it, burned it, destroyed it, for money. So much for holy war. By 1212, people were disillusioned. The Crusades weren't working. Professional soldiers couldn't take Jerusalem. Kings couldn't do it. Popes couldn't make it happen. So maybe someone else could. Enter children. In medieval theology, there was this idea: innocence has power. Children, uncorrupted by sin, were closer to God. Maybe their purity could achieve what violence couldn't. It's a beautiful idea. It's also a dangerous one, because it puts the burden of salvation on the most vulnerable. And in 1212, that burden became literal. The story begins in France and Germany. Two movements, two different boys, both claiming divine visions, both promising miracles, both leading children to disaster. Let's start with France. A shepherd boy named Stephen of Cloyes, 12 or 13 years old, tending sheep in the fields. And according to him, Jesus appeared, gave him a letter, told him to deliver it to the King of France, and to gather children to reclaim the Holy Land. Now, did this actually happen? Probably not. Medieval sources are unreliable. They love miracles, they love drama, they're not great with facts. But here's what we know for sure. A boy named Stephen started preaching, and children started following him. Thousands of them. Why? Because Stephen promised something no adult could. A miracle. He said the Mediterranean Sea would part for them, like the Red Sea for Moses. They would walk to Jerusalem. No violence, no bloodshed, just faith. And thousands of kids believed him. Think about that. Thousands of children, leaving their homes, leaving their families, to follow a shepherd boy to the sea because he promised a miracle. It sounds insane, but in 1212, it made sense. These kids grew up hearing about crusades, about holy war, about Jerusalem, about how reclaiming the Holy Land was the most important thing in the world. They'd been indoctrinated their whole lives, and now someone was offering them a role, not as spectators, as heroes. Of course they went. Stephen gathered his followers, started marching toward Paris to meet the king, to get official blessing, and along the way, more children joined. Estimates vary wildly. Some sources say 30,000. Some say way less. The truth? Probably a few thousand. Still, thousands of children. Marching across France, following a boy who claimed to talk to Jesus. Parents either supported it or couldn't stop it. The church? Mixed. Some clergy encouraged it, saw it as divine will. Some condemned it, saw it as dangerous delusion. But nobody stopped it. And the march continued. Now, here's where it gets complicated. These weren't all children, not in the modern sense. Children in medieval sources could mean anyone under 18, could mean teenagers, young adults, could even mean followers in a religious sense. Some sources suggest there were adults in the crowd too. Poor people, desperate people, looking for meaning, for hope, for escape. But the core, definitely young, definitely vulnerable, definitely being led by someone who had no idea what he was doing. Stephen reached Paris, demanded to see the king. The king refused, told the children to go home. This should have been the end. King says no, divine mission over, go home. But Stephen didn't give up. He pivoted. Okay, the king won't help, but God will. We'll go to Marseille. The sea will part there. And the children followed. Hundreds of miles, on foot, through medieval France. No supplies, no organization, no plan, just faith. And you can imagine how that went. Kids got sick. Kids got injured. Kids died on the road. Some turned back. Some were abandoned. Some just disappeared. But enough kept going, driven by belief, by desperation, by the sunk cost fallacy. We've come this far, we can't turn back. They reached Marseille, stood at the shore, and waited for the miracle. Stephen prayed. The children prayed. They waited and waited. And the sea didn't part. Of course it didn't, because seas don't part. Miracles don't happen on command. And the shepherd boy isn't Moses. But the kids were stuck, far from home, no food, no shelter. What do you do? Some went home, defeated, ashamed. Some stayed in Marseille, became beggars. And some, this is where it gets really dark. Some merchants approached, offered to help, said they'd transport the children to the Holy Land, free of charge, out of Christian charity. The children, desperate and naive, said yes. They boarded ships, 7 ships, packed with children, sailing to the Holy Land, to Jerusalem, to fulfill their mission. Except they weren't going to Jerusalem. They were going to North Africa, to slave markets. The merchants sold them, thousands of children, sold into slavery, in Tunisia, in Alexandria, in Morocco. Some sources say 2 ships sank in a storm. Everyone drowned. The others, slavery, for the rest of their lives. That's what happened to Stephen's crusade. Not a miracle, not a holy mission. Betrayal, exploitation, tragedy. Now let's talk about Germany, because France wasn't the only place this happened. Around the same time, a boy named Nicholas, from Cologne, also claiming visions, also promising miracles, also gathering children. Nicholas's story is similar but different. He didn't promise the sea would part. He promised God would grant them victory, that their innocence would convert Muslims, that Jerusalem would fall without a fight. And German children followed him, thousands of them, marching south, toward Italy, toward the Alps, in summer. Think about that. Medieval children, crossing the Alps, on foot. No gear, no guides, no experience. It was a death march. Many died from exposure. Many died from starvation. Many died from falls. But some made it. They reached Italy, reached Genoa, expected the sea to part there too. It didn't. The city told them to leave. Some went home, defeated, ashamed. Some stayed in Rome to appeal to the Pope. Pope Innocent III met with them, and you know what he said? Go home. He released them from their vows, told them their crusade was over. Some listened, some didn't. Some kept going to other Italian ports, looking for ships. And again, merchants stepped in, offered passage. We'll take you to the Holy Land. And again, the children believed them. And again, they were sold into slavery. So both crusades, France and Germany, ended the same way. Not in Jerusalem, in slave markets. Now, here's the question. How much of this is true? Because medieval sources are messy. They contradict each other. They exaggerate. They moralize. Modern historians debate the details. Did it happen exactly like this? Probably not. Did something like this happen? Definitely. Here's what we know for sure. In 1212, large groups of young people, led by charismatic preachers, marched toward the Mediterranean. Many died, many were sold into slavery. It was a disaster. The specifics, fuzzy. The tragedy, real. And that's what matters. Because even if the details are unclear, the pattern is clear. Religious fervor, charismatic leaders, vulnerable followers, exploitation, tragedy. That pattern repeats throughout history, still happening today, just different names, different contexts, same human behavior. Let's talk about why this happened. Why would parents let their kids go? Why would the church allow it? Why would society enable it? First, desperation. Life in 1212 was hard, for peasants especially. Poverty, hunger, disease, war. The Crusades offered hope, not just spiritual hope, material hope. Crusaders got land, got wealth, got status. If your life sucks and someone offers a path to something better, you take it, even if it's your kid taking it. Second, indoctrination. These kids grew up in a world where religion was everything. The church controlled education, controlled information, controlled the narrative. Jerusalem is sacred. Muslims are enemies. Crusades are holy. That's not debatable. That's just truth. If you're raised in that, you don't question it. You accept it. And when a boy says, God told me to lead a crusade, you believe him. Third, social pressure. If your neighbor's kid is going and you don't send yours, what does that say about your faith? Are you a bad Christian? Are you unpatriotic? Are you a coward? Social conformity is powerful, especially in tight-knit communities. You do what everyone else does, even if it's insane. Fourth, charismatic leadership. Stephen and Nicholas weren't just kids. They were preachers, convincing, passionate, magnetic. They believe their own hype, and belief is contagious. When someone is absolutely certain, it's hard not to follow, even if they're 12, especially if they're 12, because kids that age are fearless. They don't understand consequences. They think they're invincible, and that confidence, it attracts followers. Fifth, the adults failed. Parents failed to protect their kids. The church failed to guide responsibly. The state failed to intervene. Merchants actively exploited. Everyone failed, and the kids paid the price. Now, let's talk about what happened after, because the Children's Crusade didn't just end. It echoed. It became a story, a legend, a warning, and a symbol. In the immediate aftermath, Europe was horrified. Thousands of kids gone, dead or enslaved, families destroyed, communities shattered. There was blame, lots of blame. Some blamed the kids. They were foolish. Some blamed the parents. They were negligent. Some blamed the church. They encouraged fanaticism. Some blamed the merchants. They were evil. Everyone blamed someone, but nobody took responsibility. Because that's how tragedies work. Lots of people contribute. Nobody feels accountable. The church tried to spin it. This was a test of faith. The children are martyrs. But that didn't stick, because martyrdom implies willing sacrifice. These kids were tricked, exploited, murdered, or enslaved. That's not martyrdom. That's a crime. And deep down, people knew it. So the story got buried. Not completely, but enough. It became a cautionary tale. Don't follow false prophets. Don't let passion override reason. Protect your children. Good lessons, but they didn't stop it from happening again. Because humans don't learn. We repeat, over and over. Different costumes, same play. All right, let's pause here. Take a breath. This is heavy, and it gets heavier. In part 2, we're diving into the aftermath, the psychology, the exploitation, and the modern parallels. Because this isn't just medieval history. This is a template for cults, for extremism, for manipulation. It's still happening. We just call it different things. See you in part 2. Welcome back. If you fell asleep, I hope you didn't dream of marching children. If you're still here, let's continue. We left off with thousands of children sold into slavery. Now let's talk about why. How did this happen? How did adults enable it? How did society fail so completely? And most importantly, how does it still happen? Let's start with the merchants, the ones who offered free passage to the Holy Land. Who were they? We don't know names. Sources are vague. But we know they were opportunists, slave traders, human traffickers. They saw vulnerable kids, far from home, desperate, naive, and they saw profit. This wasn't spontaneous. This was calculated. They knew what they were doing, and they did it anyway, because money. The slave trade in the Mediterranean was massive. North African markets wanted labor. Christian children were valuable. Young, strong, could be converted to Islam or kept as slaves. High demand, low supply. Until the Children's Crusade. Then suddenly, abundant supply. The merchants didn't create the crusade, but they sure as hell exploited it. And nobody stopped them. Why? Because slavery was normal. Not Christian on Christian slavery in Europe, but selling Christians to Muslims? Different category. Still bad, but complicated. The church condemned it, but the church also didn't have enforcement power. Merchants operated in gray zones, ports, international waters, loopholes, and they got away with it. Most of them. There's one account that says 2 merchants were eventually caught, executed years later for human trafficking, but most, nothing. They profited and disappeared into history. Now let's talk about the kids who survived, the ones who made it home, or who stayed in slavery. What happened to them? For those who returned, shame. That's the first thing. They'd left as holy warriors, came back as failures. Their families were either relieved or angry, or both. Their communities judged them. You abandoned your responsibilities. You wasted resources. You embarrassed us. Some kids were welcomed back. Some weren't. Some became outcasts, beggars, criminals. The crusade broke them, and society didn't care. For those who were enslaved, we don't know much. A few accounts survive, letters smuggled out, stories told decades later. Some were ransomed. Families paid to get them back, if they could afford it. Most couldn't. Some converted to Islam to survive. Better to convert than die. Some died in captivity, worked to death, beaten, forgotten. And the world moved on. Because medieval life was brutal. People died all the time. Kids died all the time. This was just another tragedy in a long list of tragedies. But here's the thing. It didn't have to happen. Every step of the way, adults could have intervened, and didn't. Let's break down the failures. Failure 1. The parents. They sent their kids, or couldn't stop them. Either way, failure. But they believed it was holy. Doesn't matter. Your job as a parent is to protect your child, not to send them on a suicide mission, even if a shepherd boy says God wants it. Failure 2. The church. Some clergy encouraged the crusade, blessed the children, told them God was with them. Others stayed silent, didn't want to seem faithless. The Pope eventually said, "Go home," but too late, after thousands were already gone. The church had moral authority, could have stopped it immediately, didn't. Failure 3. The state. Kings and local lords knew what was happening, could have shut it down, arrested the preachers, sent the kids home. But they didn't. Why? Politics. Stopping a holy crusade looked bad, even if it was kids, even if it was insane. Image mattered more than lives. Failure 4. Society. Regular people watched kids march, gave them food, shelter, encouragement. God bless you. You're so brave. We're praying for you. Nobody said, "This is insane. Go home." Or if they did, nobody listened, because social momentum had taken over. When everyone's doing something, it feels right, even if it's wrong. Especially if it's wrong. That's how mass delusion works. Individual rationality disappears, groupthink takes over, and disasters happen. Now let's talk about the psychology. Why did the kids believe? Why did they follow? First, developmental stage. Kids and teenagers are impressionable. Their brains aren't fully developed, specifically the prefrontal cortex, the part that handles risk assessment, long-term planning, impulse control. It's not done growing until your mid-20s. So a 12-year-old can't fully grasp consequences, can't evaluate risk properly, sees adventure, not death march. That's not stupidity. That's biology. Second, indoctrination. These kids grew up in a religious monoculture. Church every day, biblical stories every day. Jerusalem is sacred every day. That's not education, that's programming. And when you're programmed from birth, you don't question, you obey. Third, social proof. Everyone else is going, so it must be okay. If you see hundreds of kids marching, singing, praying, it feels safe. It feels right. Your brain says, this many people can't be wrong. Except they can. They absolutely can. Fourth, charisma. Stephen and Nicholas were good at this. They had conviction. They had passion. They had certainty. And certainty is magnetic, especially to uncertain people. Kids don't know what to believe. Adults tell them conflicting things. Then a boy their age says, "I know the truth. God told me." That's appealing. That's clarity in confusion. So they follow. Fifth, desperation. Life in 1212 sucked. For most people, especially poor people. No future, no opportunity, no hope. Then someone offers meaning, purpose, a chance to be special, to matter. Of course you take it, even if it's dangerous. Danger is better than hopelessness. Sixth, sunk cost fallacy. Once you've walked 100 miles, you're not turning back. I've already sacrificed so much. I can't quit now. So you keep going, even when it's clearly failing, even when people are dying, because admitting you were wrong is harder than continuing to be wrong. All these factors combined created the perfect storm for exploitation, for tragedy. And here's the scary part. It still happens. Not children's crusades, but the same mechanism. Different packaging, same human vulnerability. let's talk modern parallels, because this isn't ancient history. This is a playbook that gets used over and over. Example 1. Child soldiers. In conflicts around the world, kids as young as 8, recruited, indoctrinated, armed, told they're freedom fighters, told they're holy warriors, told they'll be heroes. And they believe it, because they're kids, and kids believe. Same mechanism as 1212, different context. Example 2. Cult recruitment. Charismatic leader, promises of salvation, isolation from family, group reinforcement. We're special, we're chosen, follow me. Thousands of people have fallen for this, adults and kids, because the psychology works. Example 3. Extremist recruitment. Online radicalization. Young people, isolated, angry, searching for meaning. Someone offers purpose. Join us, fight the enemy, change the world. And they do, because humans need meaning. And if you don't have it, someone will sell it to you. Example 4. MLM schemes. Be your own boss. Financial freedom. Join our team. Targets vulnerable people. Promises miracles. Delivers debt. It's not a crusade, but it's the same manipulation. False promises, exploitation, profit. Example 5. Influencer manipulation. Kids following YouTubers, TikTokers. Do this challenge. Buy this product. Believe this thing. And kids comply because their favorite creators said so. It's not as deadly as 1212, but the mechanism, identical. Charismatic figure, vulnerable audience, unquestioning obedience. The Children's Crusade is a template for how humans can be manipulated, especially young humans, especially desperate humans. And the template still works because human nature hasn't changed. We're still vulnerable to charisma, certainty, belonging, purpose, social proof. Those aren't bugs, those are features. They're how we survived as a species, but they're also how we get exploited by people who understand how we work and use it against us. So what's the lesson? How do you protect against this? How do you avoid being the parent sending their kid on a crusade, or the kid marching to their death? First, critical thinking. Question everything, especially things that sound too good to be true. The sea will part? Really? God spoke to me. Prove it. Everyone's doing it. So what? Teach kids to think, not just to obey. Second, healthy skepticism, especially of charismatic leaders. If someone is absolutely certain, be suspicious. Life is complicated. Truth is nuanced. Anyone claiming simple answers to complex problems? Probably lying or delusional. Either way, don't follow them. Third, protect the vulnerable. Kids, desperate people, isolated people. They're targets. Check in on them. Offer support. Give them meaning that doesn't require exploitation. Fourth, hold institutions accountable. The church failed in 1212. Don't let modern institutions fail now. Schools, governments, organizations, they have a duty to protect. Make them do it. Fifth, learn history, because this happened before. It'll happen again unless we recognize the pattern and interrupt it. That's why stories like the Children's Crusade matter, not just as tragedy, but as warning. All right, take another breath. We're almost done. In part 3, we're wrapping up, talking about memory, how we tell this story, why it still matters, and what we owe the children who died. See you in a minute. Welcome to the final part. If you're still awake, thank you. If you're asleep, I hope you wake up thoughtful. Let's bring this home. We've talked about what happened. We've talked about why. Now let's talk about what it means. how do we remember the Children's Crusade? And what do we owe the kids who died? First, let's address the mythology, because the Children's Crusade became a legend, not accurate history, a story. And like all stories, it got simplified. The popular version: innocent children inspired by faith marched to Jerusalem. God didn't help them. They died. The end. That's clean, simple, moral. But it's not the whole truth. The whole truth is messier. Some kids weren't that young. Some weren't that innocent. Some went for adventure, not faith. Some were forced. Some went willingly. Some died. Some were enslaved. Some came home. It's not one story. It's thousands. But history prefers one story. So that's what we got. And over centuries, the legend grew. Poets wrote about it. Artists painted it. Musicians composed about it. The Children's Crusade became a symbol of innocence lost, of faith misplaced, of the church's failures, of medieval barbarism. Different eras used it differently. In the Enlightenment, proof that religion makes you stupid. In the Romantic era, tragic but beautiful. In the modern era, child exploitation. Everyone projects onto it, because the details are vague enough to be molded, but the tragedy is real enough to matter. And that's powerful, but also dangerous, because when history becomes legend, truth gets lost. And the real kids, the real thousands who died or were enslaved, they become abstractions, symbols, not people. And that's wrong. So let's remember them as people. They had names, most lost to time. They had families, mothers, fathers, siblings. They had dreams, hopes, fears. They weren't saints. They weren't idiots. They were kids, caught in something bigger than them, used by adults, failed by society, and forgotten by history, until they became a cautionary tale. That's their legacy. And maybe that's enough, if we actually learn from it. But do we? Let's be honest, not really, because the same patterns repeat. Child soldiers, cults, extremism, exploitation. We know the signs. We know the psychology. We know how to stop it. But we don't, because stopping it requires challenging authority, protecting the vulnerable, sacrificing convenience, admitting complicity. And those are hard. Easier to let it happen, and then feel bad about it later. That's what happened in 1212. That's what happens now. So what do? How do we honor the children who died? By not letting it happen again. By recognizing the warning signs. By intervening. By protecting kids. By questioning charismatic leaders. By teaching critical thinking. By holding institutions accountable. That's the tribute they deserve. Not statues, not songs, action. Now, let's talk about the what-ifs. What if the sea had actually parted? What if they'd reached Jerusalem? What if they succeeded? Would we celebrate them? Absolutely. They'd be heroes. Saints, probably. The greatest crusade ever. But they didn't succeed. They died. So they're tragic, not heroic. And that's the thing about history. Success is heroic, failure is pathetic, even if the action is identical. The Children's Crusade failed, so it's remembered as foolish. But if it had worked, we'd be teaching it as faith triumphant. That's uncomfortable, because it means morality is outcome dependent. And maybe it is, but it shouldn't be. The kids weren't wrong to have faith. They were wrong to be exploited. The adults were wrong to enable it. The merchants were wrong to profit. That's where the evil was, not in the kids, in the system that failed them. Let's talk about one more thing. The aftermath for the families. The parents who sent their kids. What did they feel? We don't have many records, but we can imagine. Grief, obviously, but also guilt. I let them go. I believe the preacher. I thought God would protect them. And now they're gone, dead or enslaved. And you have to live with that every day for the rest of your life. Some parents probably broke, mentally, emotionally. Some probably doubled down. It was God's will. They're martyrs. Denial is easier than guilt. And some, maybe, learned and vowed never again. We don't know, because medieval sources don't care about peasant grief. They care about kings and saints, not parents who lost their children to a Khan. But those parents existed, and they suffered, and they matter, even if history forgot them. Now, final thoughts. The Children's Crusade is a story about failure, systems failing, adults failing, institutions failing. But it's also a story about children, their capacity for belief, their vulnerability, their resilience. Some survived, some came home, some rebuilt lives. That's not nothing. That's human strength. In the face of horror, some humans endure. Not because they're special, because they have to. And they do. The children who marched in 1212 weren't special. They were ordinary kids, in extraordinary circumstances, manipulated by adults, failed by society, but not broken by it. Not all of them. Some survived, some remembered, some passed on the story. And 800 plus years later, we're still talking about it. That's their legacy. Not the crusade itself, but the lesson it teaches. About vulnerability, about exploitation, about the duty adults have to protect children, about the danger of charisma and certainty, about the importance of skepticism, about the cost of blind faith. Those lessons are timeless, and if we learn them, maybe the children didn't die for nothing. That's the best we can do. Remember them, learn from them, and don't let it happen again. All right, we're done. You made it, or you didn't, and you're dreaming. Either way, thank you for listening. This was heavy, dark, sad, but important, because children are still vulnerable. Adults still fail them. Systems still exploit them. And if we don't remember history, we repeat it. So, remember this. Remember the children who marched, who believed, who died, who were forgotten. Sleep well.